So when Congress increased the size of the army, they also passed a series of taxes to pay for said army. Now, Americans in 1776 didn't particularly like a large standing army, and they didn't particularly like the taxes required to pay for said standing army. And most of the Americans that had protested in 1776 were still alive in 1799, when this came to fruition. And their feelings about the subject hadn't much changed, nor had their methods of protest. In fact, liberty poles were put up all over Pennsylvania and Western Massachusetts as a way to say, hey, we didn't really like this 20 years ago, we still don't like it now. And this is the part of the story that I think is sometimes lost in sort of basic history textbooks, is that Americans at the time saw the Alien and Sedition laws and the Army and the taxes as the three corners of a Federalist system. And they didn't actually really associate this Federalist system with Adams as much as they associated it with Hamilton and the other arch Federalists. But they saw all three as interconnected because you needed the Army to enforce the Alien and Sedition laws, you needed the taxes to pay for the Army, and if you criticized them, then you were going to be arrested under the Sedition law. So they all kind of came together. Now this rebellion, the Freeze Rebellion is really kind of overstating things. It was a small group of mostly Revolutionary War veterans, many of whom had actually been Federalists or had served with Washington. They objected to the taxes. They were not violent. They didn't kill anyone. They didn't burn down any houses. This was a very modest rebellion by the standards of American rebellions. The overreaction was so ridiculous that many of the soldiers that were called out to crush it said, basically, what are we doing here? There's nothing to round up, and the only casualty was a cow that they accidentally fired upon, thinking it was someone else. So
not so sacred cow.
So they round up these rebels, they try the cases. If you read the proceedings of the cases, they are an outrage under sort of what we would consider to be any form of judicial standards today. Basically the judges from the very beginning said, these people are guilty, here's your evidence, here's how you are to decide the case. And a couple in particular were convicted of treason, and Adams was immediately uncomfortable with this because it established a definition of treason that was so capacious that it meant that if anyone basically made any sort of mistake, you could be held liable under this definition. And so immediately he starts asking about pardons, and this was partially because Washington had pardoned many of the whiskey rebels. So there was actually precedent for doing so.